A night at the aquarium. Did I ever tell you about the time I caught an 8-foot tiger shark on a diaper pin? It was my wife's fault. Mind you, I love my wife dearly, but there are a couple things you need to know about her to understand why I ended up fishing with a diaper pin. First, she has this fanatical notion about maintaining the schedule. I don't know if your wife is the same way, but the kids eat at the same time every day and go to bed at the same time every night. And if the Martians invaded, the schedule would not be allowed to change by a half second. It's not a concept I wholeheartedly support, but she insists it's best for the children, although sometimes exasperating for those of us who don't wear a watch. Another thing about my wife is the fact she has a tendency to be forgetful, which, most of the time, I find cute. Nevertheless, on this particular occasion, the being cute proved to be the catalyst for a little lost time, and me nearly losing my leg. It must have happened 4 or 5 years ago because the littlest was still in nappies. As I remember, it was Memorial Day, and we were visiting the grandparents in Connecticut. Naturally, while in Mystic, it's always mandatory to take the kids to the aquarium. It's a large collection of wonderful aquatic displays, and the kids love the place. Unfortunately, we got there late, and we're only about halfway through the tour, somewhere between the sea anemone display and the dolphin pool, when the loudspeaker announced it was 5 minutes until closing. This was bad news for some, but I could tell my wife was relieved. She's not nearly as fond of fishy things as the children and myself. This is completely understandable. She prefers fish as a main course with capers and lemon, and perhaps some ratatouille. However, the children were upset by the need to depart. Of course, Monster Boy bolted, thinking he could see everything within the allotted 5 minutes, but I was able to catch him. I explained that we would come back in a day or so and complete the learning experience. We were leisurely strolling to the car, already in the parking lot, when my wife made one of her typical announcements. The baby's bag. I left the baby's carry-all inside the aquarium. This was not an uncommon occurrence. To my wife's way of thinking, it is perfectly reasonable to drop the heavy bag at any point where it becomes a burden, knowing that we would be walking in a circle anyway, which is logical, but only when you're living on a farm like we are. I don't know about you, but I spend a considerable amount of time looking for purses, car keys, portable phones, passports, hats, and coats, and sometimes the car. She smiled that beautiful smile, and I handed her the car keys. As I walked back towards the aquarium entrance, I listened to my wife's fading voice giving me some additional vague clues as to the possible locations where she might have left the bag, along with an insistence to hurry because it was nearing the time to feed the baby. I walked on, wondering if it might be possible to calibrate an atomic clock using the baby's feeding schedule. I had no trouble re-entering the modern building. As a matter of fact, I didn't encounter a single person. Once inside, I had some difficulty locating the bag. The process was not helped by the fact that all the lights had suddenly been switched off. The search was also hindered because my wife had chosen to hide the bag for security reasons. It was in a small cubbyhole under the stairs on the far side of the building. The search and rescue mission for the nappy bag took about 20 minutes. I knew there was a problem as soon as I returned to the main entrance. The only light, the last of the afternoon sun coming in through 2 thin slit windows, revealed that the doors had been chained and locked. Just as anyone would have, I tried the doors anyway in the hope that they were not as locked as they looked. The chains and padlock were superfluous because the deadbolt seemed to be working just fine. I was imprisoned in the aquarium. At first, I was a little frustrated by the inconvenience. I knew my wife wouldn't hesitate a nanosecond to abandon me if I caused a moment's delay in the baby's schedule. Interruptions to the schedule are furboat tin. I then began to circumnavigate the facility once again, looking for another exit. I found 3 more doors, but they were just as locked. I looked for a phone. No luck. The office was locked also. I was trapped, standing in the middle of the immense, irregularly shaped room, the only light an eerie, wavering blue glow coming from each of the large fish displays. I suddenly realized that I might be stuck there for the night. My wife would have left by then. The impatience of a hungry baby and the knowledge that the house was less than a mile away would have ensured her speedy departure. That's when I smiled to myself. I was stranded in the Mystic Aquarium, with over 50 huge exhibits, and maybe 800 or 900 different specimens of fish, and didn't have a fishing rod. I contemplated the best course of action. Trying to break out seemed impossible. Any serious attempt would surely cause considerable damage. All I could do was wait for help to arrive. That's when I heard the distant chattering chuckle from the dolphins. The laughter lightened my heart, and I knew I had to make the best of the situation. I mimicked the dolphins' jittering giggle to myself, and contemplated how to entertain myself while locked in a huge dark aquarium filled with fish. The first thing I did was take inventory of my worldly possessions. I had 2 cloth diapers, 4 large safety pins, a jar of banana baby food, a stuffed teddy bear, and a small replica of a Teletubby. In my pocket I had 42 cents, a keychain, and a stick of gum. My resources were limited. On further exploration of the building, I found a door leading into a large utility room. Turning on the lights, I discovered the room was filled with cleaning supplies, general maintenance gear, and a small workbench. In the back corner of the room, there was a metal ladder leading up to a dark square opening in the ceiling. Ignoring the authorized personnel only sign, I climbed the ladder. When I peered into the upper level, I was amazed to see blue light rippling across a black ceiling and heard the soft hum of whirring pumps, bubbling water, and the rhythmic sound of ocean waves. The floor was stacked with boxes of fish food, and raised metal catwalks led from one huge fish habitat to the next. Looking down into the first tank, my mind raced with potential. Beneath the undulating water were 30 or more uncommonly plump stripers, sea bass, all swimming in perfect harmony within a simulated tidal estuary. I was locked in a fisherman's paradise. I'd always marveled at the aquarium's ability to maintain the largest and finest specimens. All the fish there were fat and healthy, trophy-sized whoopers. It was then I knew exactly how I'd be spending my confinement. Scrambled back down the ladder, I began frantically putting together some makeshift fishing gear. I took the head off a mop for my rod and found some string on the bench for line. I jerry-rigged a Coke can with a pencil for AA reel and duct-tapped it to the base of my new rod mop. My keychain made the line guides and I bent the baby safety pins into hooks. Using some super glue, copper wire, and various bits of the kids' toys, I fashioned a streamer that resembled a minnow with Teletubby eyes. Within a half hour I was ready to try my luck. It took about 10 seconds to hook my first striper, and a good fight it was. But then, after a little reflection, I decided to catch only fish I'd never landed before. I'd already caught plenty of perch, trout, permit, and salmon, but now, given the opportunity, I decided to focus my attentions on more exotic fish, those I'd never have the chance to catch anywhere else. The first fish I went for was a blue tang, a brightly colored reef fish. I had gotten one interested when out from behind the rocks dashed a lionfish that took the hook. This was bad news. Not a large fish, it does have a splendid appearance but also has poisonous spines. It took some doing, but I managed to release the deadly fish without getting stabbed by its venomous spiked fins. After that, the fishing was fast and furious. The fish there had never experienced much pressure, and they all proved to be easy marks. I snagged a long-nosed butterfly fish, Chelman rostratus. I landed a rainbow wrassa, Chorus julis, and a parrotfish, Scarus vetula, without any problems. I hooked an odd-looking lumpsucker, Cyclopterus lumpus, and a triggerfish, Odonus niger, in a matter of minutes. Moving from tank to tank, I caught and released an African lungfish, Protopterus ethipicus, a small clownfish, Amphiprion percola, and a red mullet, Mullus cermuletus, one right after the other. As a precaution, I avoided the tank filled with archer fish, so I didn't get spit on by the little buggers. Finally, after successfully landing over 50 different specimens, I decided to challenge my skills on some of the big boys. Cautiously, I approached the largest of all the tanks, a huge 200,000-gallon circular structure located in the very center of the building. This was the main attraction. Among all the other fish in the tank, there were also 3 10-foot-long tiger sharks, Galeocerda cuvieri. I have to admit, I was more than a little intimidated as I stood looking down into the water, and shuddered when a dorsal fin cut the surface like a knife a few feet away. After seeing the exhibit in the main gallery, I knew the tiger sharks had long curved scimitar teeth jutting out in crazy directions from their hideously grinning mouths. They're ugly, mean-looking critters with remorseless gray eyes, and a much-deserved reputation as one of the most notorious man-eaters. I changed flies to the large squid pattern with teddy bear eyes and added some wire tippet to the line on the mop. My first cast into the shark tank was rewarded with a staggering strike. That's when things got complicated. The rod mop tip snapped, I stumbled, and with another yank, I tumbled headfirst into the water. Splash! The water in the shark tank was surprisingly warm. Less of a bonus was the fact that my line had tangled around my shoe and it was attached to a deadly, vicious predator. The tiger shark didn't like being hooked and began thrashing and shaking its head. It then bolted, as in, began rapidly swimming around the tank. I, with the cord around my shoe, was, of course, dragged behind the shark like an underwater kite. The two other tiger sharks in the tank, initially startled by the commotion, then noticed the fun and started following with interest. I was in a real fix. All I could think about was how angry my wife would be if I lost an arm or a leg while goofing off. Well, that, and the fact that I couldn't breathe. Finally, I was able to grab onto a hunk of coral. The following jolt nearly caused me to lose my grip, but I was able to hold on. The other two sharks glided by and gave me a bump, their uncaring, hungry eyes swiveling to see my reaction. Note: if you're getting the side eye from a tiger shark, you're probably in trouble. Just saying. The hooked shark was yanked to a sudden stop, turned, and headed straight at me, a sight guaranteed to put your hackles up. I scrambled into the nearest sanctuary, which was a small cave built into the simulated coral reef. Still holding my breath, I bit through the line connecting my shoe to the unfriendly shark as it swam back and forth inches away. Of course, I wanted to swim for the surface, but the never-ending parade of shark teeth made me hesitate. My lungs began to ache for want of air. That's when another of the tank's inhabitants began paying attention to me. I hadn't seen the octopus until it wrapped its tentacles around my head. Once I freed myself from that problem, I pulled in the remains of my fishing rod mop and was able to slip it through a gap in the rocks in a roof of the cave. Fortunately, it was a hollow tube and just long enough to use as a snorkel. As I gulped my first breath in over a minute, I was thinking, if I ever get home, I'm probably not going to mention this little episode. There I was, stuck in an underwater cave, breathing through a mop, with 3 tiger sharks waiting for me to do something foolish, so they can eat me. The good news, the octopus had moved and was now hugging my leg. It was an uncomfortable situation. At any second, I was sure the sharks would become brave enough to attack. Then, to my horror, I noticed I had a small cut on the back of my hand from the coral. A thin tendril of blood drifted from my hand like a wisp of smoke. What a way to go, I thought. This was just the sort of thing that's always hard to explain to my wife. The sharks moved in closer, growing bolder with each passing second. I knew I had to make a move soon or I'd be the main course in a frenzy feed. I saw a small opening in the shark's swimming pattern. Not a large one, but it was definitely time to go. I lunged for the side of the tank and dodged right just as the largest of the monsters slammed into the glass wall inches from my back. Pushing off the sandy bottom, I sprung for the surface and threw both elbows over the rim of the tank, gulping air in panicked desperation. As I was hauling myself onto the deck, I felt a vicious tug. My left shoe was pulled off as I was pulled back into the shark tank. The Jaws theme drummed in my head. As I flailed for the ledge, there were 2 more simultaneous yanks, one on the back of my shirt, and the other on my baggy Bermuda shorts. One of the sharks had taken the backside out of my shorts and eaten my wallet. I'd had enough, turned, dove under, and punched one of the brutes in the snout, and jabbed another in the eye with my thumb. Fortunately, the third shark was occupied chewing on my Converse All-Star. Kicked for the surface again this time, flew out of the tank without suffering another attack. Panting, I scrambled in a crab walk away from the edge of the tank, noticing I still was wearing the octopus. Pulling the octopus off the second time was harder, and the suckers on its tentacles left bright red hickeys on my leg. That's going to be difficult to explain. Sitting down with my back to some boxes of fish food, I watched the octopus slink back into the water. As I sat there still gasping for air, I stared at my shoeless foot and counted my toes. Once the panic subsided, I headed back down the ladder. Staggering, I dragged myself back to the large central display. Barely able to stand, I leaned my palm on the glass and whimsically noted how different the view is on this side of the glass. The sharks were slowly circling the tank as if nothing had happened. The only things out of place were the high-top shoe, already a crab house, and the driver's license impaled on one of the shark's teeth. After the ordeal, I visited the dolphins. They laughed at me. I then walked through the aquarium in the dark for a while and ate the jar of baby food. I fell asleep under a display for children with a clear dome looking into a school of neon tetra. In the morning, I woke to the sound of voices and found the aquarium filled with visitors. Stopping by the huge shark tank, I overheard 2 9-year-old boys speaking. "What's that?" asked one. "Looks like a Converse All-Star with a crab living in it," replied the other. I blinked in the bright morning sunshine outside and limped home. As soon as I walked through the door, my wife immediately noticed my appearance. Crossing her arms, she demanded, "Where is the back of your shorts? Where's the back of your shirt? Where is your shoe? Why is your leg covered in hickeys? Where were you last night?" I had to explain, of course. She rolled her eyes and said, "I'm sorry you got locked in the aquarium, but it sounds like you had a nice time."